Anna's 19 now. The typical child with her diagnosis has had 13 surgeries by the time they're her age. She's had zero. The result was an absolute miraculous change in her health outcome. I used these concepts I learned with my other kids, and ultimately my practice of medicine changed, and now I specialize in taking care of people with complex health issues that our current healthcare system has neglected by telling people nothing can be done for them. There's nothing wrong with them. It's all in their head, and they have no hope. And these people come to me, and I basically find things, connect the dots. They actually get their body back on the track to healing.
Hey, Aaron, it's so nice to have you on the show today. How are you doing?
Doing well. I'm super excited to be here and just share a little bit about what's going on over here.
Beautiful, man, and thank you so very much for being here. You see, I truly appreciate you. And you see, Aaron, oftentimes I love to thank my guest for two things. And I do this so often to the point where it has become my anthem. So, firstly, Aaron, I want to say thank you so very much for investing in yourself. You see, you are on this platform right now because you did invest that in yourself. And oftentimes, my man, I love to make reference to the amazing mango tree. You see, Aaron, some couple of months back, I was on a particular road, and just by the roadside, my man, there was this very tall, unattractive mango tree. And I use the word unattractive because the mango tree's got no mangoes on it, and the leaves were all dry. So I just walked past it and I went my way. But you see, Aaron, just recently, I was on that same road. And this time around, a lot's changed about the mango tree, you see. The mango tree caught my attention pretty good from a distance. And immediately, I got the urge to move so close to it, of which I did. And it wowed me. Because now the mango tree's got a lot of mangoes on it. Beautiful green leaves and healthy branches. And not just mangoes now, Aaron. I'm talking about ripe mangoes. It was such a lovely experience that day, and I was so, so excited. Here is my point. The fact that you dedicated your time, energy, and resources to becoming the amazing Aaron that you are today, that alone has made it impossible for me to skip you. And that's why you got the request from me to be on the show because I was attracted to the fruit of all that you're doing, your philosophies, your insight, the impact your work is having, and how you are offering your solutions, Aaron. These stuffs are beautiful. And just before I sent you that request, my man, I said to myself, I've got to benefit from these beautiful things Aaron is doing. And not only me now, because I don't want to be selfish, and even with the audience. And here we are today with the amazing Aaron. So thank you so very much for doing that to yourself. And secondly, thank you for saying yes to the invite. Because if you had said nope, there was nothing Elisha could do about it. Thanks so much, my man.
Thanks.
Beautiful. So let's get started. You see, I am quite excited to have you on the show today, Aaron, for some reasons. Firstly, my interest in knowledge seeking. I believe in order for one to transition from a terrible situation to that of a beautiful one, Aaron, I believe it takes the application of knowledge, quality information. And you see, my man, not just knowledge alone, but the application of it. And you see, ever since I discovered that light in the Hebrew means knowledge and darkness, ignorance, I've been so keen to knowledge seeking. Why? Because I do not want to remain in the dark. So that's going to make our conversation today very important to me and even to the listeners. And the second reason why I'm excited to have the incredible Aaron on the show is for the sake of the audience. You see, Aaron, we live in an age where information is as abundant as grains of sand. We've got lots of information flying out there. So this folks trust me for quality, eye-opening, and very important information, of which I am totally convinced, my man, that our conversation is going to be insightful and impactful. So for that reason, Aaron, let's get started with your introduction. Talk to us about your personal or your professional journey, because right now we are so curious. We want to know how Aaron got here. Then afterwards, I've gotten some beautiful questions for you. Okay, Aaron, over to you.
Thanks so much. Super excited to be here and just share with your audience. Yeah, I'm a medical doctor in the United States, and my journey started a very traditional journey for a medical doctor. Went to school, finished my board certification, joined the military. It was very much a similar, the path commonly traveled on. But what the inflection point, what changed everything, was when my wife, who worked with kids with special needs, asked me if we were willing to bring one of these her patients, Anna, into our home. Anna had been abandoned in the hospital by her birth mother. She had done drugs the entire pregnancy. Anna had a stroke before she was born. So, her prognosis was pretty poor. The physicians and specialists had said she'd never walk, talk, or crawl. And so when my wife asked me, would we be willing to bring this girl in our home? I kind of had to think about what I believe, my personal faith and belief system. And part of what I believe you know, is that true religion is to take care of the widow, orphan, and stranger. It's just part of my system kind of growing up. And so I had this basically an orphan, a homeless child. And so I just brought her into our house, just doing what I'm supposed to do. We talked about before, just doing what I was supposed to do, right? And that one decision was the one small decision that's changed every other decision since then. So one of the first issues with my daughter was she didn't eat very well. She was small. And so in our healthcare system, they call it failure to thrive. And one of the ways they treat it is with surgery. They cut a hole in the baby's stomach, put a feeding tube in, pour formula in, and that's how they get them to gain weight. But we knew that wasn't the right answer. My wife and I had discussions about, even though she's never supposed to walk, talk, or crawl, we had faith, we had anticipation of a greater thing. And so we refused that feeding tube. And that was the first inflection point for us. The system did not like that at all. We were actually reported to the local government for child protective services. Here, that's a system where basically they investigate us for child abuse through neglect. Just because we literally all we wanted to do was give her real food, not do a surgical procedure. We navigated that, but for me, the second big inflection point was 6 months later when my wife found a growth chart for kids with cerebral palsy, which was Anna's official diagnosis. And that chart, she was in the middle. She was normal. So that was the second inflection point. I realized the specialists didn't know. And if we'd followed their initial advice, we would have gone down this really bad path. Anna's 19 now. The typical child with her diagnosis has had 13 surgeries by the time they're her age. She's had zero. The typical kid with her diagnosis has had multiple rounds of antibiotics, multiple hospitalizations for complications from surgeries and things. She's had one round of antibiotics since we got her and no hospitalizations. So her course in her health started with some small obedience, some small steps, but the result was an absolute miraculous change in her health outcome. And for me personally, I used these concepts I learned with my other kids, and ultimately my practice of medicine changed, and now I specialize in taking care of people with complex health issues that our current healthcare system has neglected by telling people nothing can be done for them. There's nothing wrong with them. It's all in their head, and they have no hope. And these people come to me, and I basically find things, connect the dots. They actually get their body back on the track to healing. One of my underlying core values or beliefs is our body was made to heal. And if you just find out what's blocking your body's ability to self-heal and self-repair, it will do what it was made to do. And just that basic, simple, childlike understanding has resulted in people with post-traumatic brain injuries, people with long COVID, people with heart attacks, people with a whole host of things, ADHD, autism. I'm not sure what illnesses they have over in Nigeria, how common those are over there, but here they're ridiculously common. Having those people actually getting better, and we've become a center for these complicated, complex issues, solely based on my initial decisions, movement, life choice with bringing Anne into our home.
Amazing. And I'm really, really glad and grateful for the beautiful work that you're doing. And you shared something very powerful. Our bodies were made to heal, because there are a lot of people whom the society had successfully deceived into believing that what you said ain't right. And what you said is actually the truth. Boy, thank you for the beautiful stuff you're doing and all that you went through with your amazing child and the miraculous outcome. Nah. I love that. So let us talk about the soil and human health. So how are soil and human health connected?
This information actually is really, really old. Many ancient healing traditions, if you go back thousands of years, Ayurvedic medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, probably in Africa as well, there are healing traditions that talk about, whether it's people come from the soil, but there's this concept that's kind of caked in humanity that we have some kind of connection with dirt, right? Not scientific, right? But it's kind of out there. Well, what I've learned through my personal studies is indeed there is a connection with soil and health. And there's actually been some books. One was actually written by a British entomologist. His name is Sir Albert Howard. And he literally documents how in India, for example, you could look at the kind of bacteria, the quality of the soil, and it would actually impact the quality of plants and then the health of the animals that ate those things. So literally, you could have one side of the road that was having traditional chemical fertilizers at that point in time being used, and people were sicker, more tuberculosis, animals were sicker. And on the other side of the road, using traditional Indian practices, which is composting, using like cow and goat and different animal feces to actually help revitalize the soil. And when I learned through like studying those basic principles and then studying animal husbandry, we have a little farm here. I call it a gentleman's farm, because it's a hobby. But learning how the health of the soil and the bacteria actually help the organisms extract more minerals, rare earth minerals, trace minerals that our body needs. There's like 96 of these different minerals and rare earth minerals. We don't even know what they do, but we know if you don't get barium, strontium, silica, these rare earth minerals in our bodies, we actually get sick. And in the veterinarian world, in the animal husbandry world, they've known this for decades. And so I started learning these things and started thinking with people, okay, how can I help institute that with my patients using things like bone broth, organ meats, having people actually eat foods that are grown in the local environment. Eating, here in the United States, the concept of eating food grown in your local environment is a foreign idea. Literally, we'll ship stuff from around the world food wise to us that's been grown, months earlier in poor in nutrition, poor soil. And we wonder why people get sick. And so it's really interesting to see the connection between healthy soil and everything that eats off of that. And that's one of the realizations I came to just through studying the science of it. And even just now in the United States, this kind of information is just now starting to get into schools. And I, started learning it 15 years ago. And I studied people who learned it almost 100 years ago, who lived in cultures who have a 2,000 plus year history. So it's really kind of funny. Sometimes the fancy new thing is just rediscovering the old thing.
Exactly. We're only rediscovering the old stuff. And the fact that you are always setting yourself to learn new things, that's amazing. And I love that. So let's return back to your daughter. So, what was the hardest part of healing your daughter's brain?
The hardest part was just finding information because there was no clinical research articles. I'm a medical doctor, clinical scientist. I even started a clinical research company in this whole journey. And you can't find that information on kids exposed to crystal meth, born early, having a stroke before they're born functionally blind. You can't find that kind of data, so to speak. So I had to start looking at adjacent, close to things like autism, traumatic brain injuries, looking at how our genes affect our metabolism, and started looking at different literature and start connecting the dots. Part of the practice of medicine is you look at the information that's out there, the published literature, and then you translate that. How does this relate to the person in front of me? And so it was a journey of just struggling. And it's one thing, Elisha, to kind of, you haven't mentioned this, but something that I talk about a lot is when I got our daughter and realized that there were things we could do, but no one was going to help me after the story I told earlier, it became a burden, a weight, a responsibility that I had to figure it out. And so it started by getting up early in the morning, doing research, reading articles. And over the period of 3 to 5 years, I learned that there actually were answers out there, not to give up. If I couldn't find the answer and I believed and looked for it, eventually I'd find things. And it's been a journey over the 15 plus years. And at this stage, I've created this, big library of information. So at this stage, if I see a person with an illness I've never seen before, I have 100% confidence I can figure it out because I've done it with so many other people. But I think the big wall that people run into is they're like, I went to my doctors, I went to the experts, and they said there's nothing to do for me. And they
Mm,
accept that limiting
mm,
belief. They accept that lack of faith, the limiting belief as, oh, this is all there is. And it's like, no. That's just the beginning. If you want to have ridiculous outcomes, um, unexpected outcomes, you can't do what everybody else before you has done. And so, which is accept the status quo. And I kind of not it. You hear it, and it makes sense, but to actually internalize it and make it a way of life took years. And now, when I see people with complicated things that sometimes I've never heard of before, which happens less and less and less these days, I know there's answers out there. I just haven't found them yet. And that knowledge and faith drives me never to ever give up on anybody, regardless of how dire the situation may be. And it started with my daughter.
I really wish every health practitioner can think like this. And what you shared is very, very true because I think when I was way younger, I think 9 or 7, I'm not really sure. I fell sick and it was pretty terrible. And I fell sick at the same time with one elderly woman. She was also sick and we were sharing the same sickness. What I was suffering from was what she was also suffering from. My own case, alright, the doctors and the staffs who were in charge of my health, they kept on saying there is nothing wrong with this fellow and don't worry, he's gonna be fine. And we don't even know what could be wrong, but I was having this temperature, I was throwing up, I was getting thinner and thinner, and the same thing was occurring to one particular woman too. To cut a long story short, that woman died. Then after she died, I was hearing stuff from my neighbors saying that the doctor said there is nothing they can do, that she is definitely going to leave this earth within a particular frame of time. And they were fearing for me because we were suffering from more like the same illness. I hope you're not also gonna leave the world. Then my mom told me that. I kept on saying that I'm never gonna die, that this stuff is definitely gonna leave me and I'll be fine. Back to what you said, which is a very profound statement, that the body was made to heal. That was the same philosophy I shared when I was young. I believe there is solution to every problem, even though I don't know how or where it is, but I know the answer is somewhere. So I appreciate what you're doing, my man. So on the short run, I got healed and it was through a wonderful plant. Back to the question I asked earlier, the connection between the soil and the human health. Just one, oh boy, Aaron, one very little plant was what took the illness away. My grandmother, she just prepared the stuff and gave me the herbs, and I was drinking it consecutively, and before you knew it, boom, my health was restored. I tell you, it was really amazing. So I've got some questions more. All right, we have just 2 more to go. So, what are blind spots in medicine?
Okay. Blind spots are the things in medicine that we sometimes are things we think to be true that are wrong, or things in plain sight that we don't acknowledge. And there's a lot of examples, in America and in European history. For example, one, it wasn't the last we used to do in our country and in Europe, they used to do brain surgery, frontal lobotomies. They take part of your brain away to treat mental health. And when I wrote my book Incurable, I actually looked up the date. The last time this was done was in France in 1991. So literally, when I was in college, they were still doing brain surgery to treat mental health issues. Go back a little further. Um, smoking in the United States, we used to say smoking was healthy for you. In the 1950s, as your doctor, I would have told you I smoke Lucky Strikes, I smoke Camels. These are good. These are healthy for you. It wasn't until 1980, the early 80s, where the Surgeon General of the United States, the top doctor in our country, said no, no, smoking causes cancer. In modern times, hormones for women's health. Back in 2002, we said, hey, hormones cause cancer. Da da da. Just in the last couple of years, we've actually found that bioidentical hormones for women can actually be regenerative, help brain health, diminish your risk for
Oh,
dementia, actually are breast protective. And so the question I asked me, the Hippocratic Oath from Hippocrates, like the father of modern medicine back, the 4th or 5th century BC, right? First and foremost, do no harm. And the thing about it is that people forget that the very first thing as a doctor I'm supposed to do is nothing. Step back and say, well, is this necessary? Do I need to do something here? If you have pneumonia, take the antibiotic, right? I mean, you have pneumonia, right? You got malaria, take the anti-malarial, right? But if you've got like something else going on, maybe the answer isn't surgery or medication. And in America, at least, that's something we forgot. In America, it's interesting, depending on what literature you look at, medical error might be the third most common cause of death in our country. So it's like complications of surgery, complications of hospitalizations, complications of medicines. So all of a sudden, when I was actually in a mission hospital in Ecuador, it was interesting in that culture to say you were getting admitted to the hospital was a death nail. We had a young child come to us, and he had meningitis. His mom waited about a week to bring him to the hospital because for her, bringing the kid to the hospital meant he was going to die. His meningitis got worse and he came to the hospital and we said, we have to admit him. and to heal her wail, I still remember the wail, like, down the hall you could hear, because in her mind, it was, "My son's gonna die." Luckily, fortunate for her, he left with her a week later, but we forget that things we do in medicine have risks, and so one of the biggest blind spots, at least in America, is the avarice or the haughtiness or the pride or whatever you wanna call it, where we think what we do is best and safe, and so these are blind spots, things that when you talk about them make sense, but our entire system, doesn't see it. And that's one of the reasons why I want to educate people and encourage people to take charge of their health because, you know, again, the United States, 80% of heart disease, 70% of most cancers can be prevented by diet and lifestyle alone. And if medical error truly is the third most, yeah, it's a little different. It's interesting. You look at textbooks of medicine in the United States versus in different African countries, die more from infectious diseases. In America, we die more from chronic diseases. It's interesting. Some of the textbooks, I was actually talking to some physicians, and it was a sub-Saharan African country, and they learned about cancer and heart disease from textbooks. They didn't see it there. What they saw were malaria and injuries and things like that. And it's really interesting how, at least in America, most of these chronic issues can be prevented by diet and lifestyle alone. And then things like tuberculosis, which are still common worldwide, just adequate vitamin D level appropriate. We know from a book by Weston A. Price that literally the complications of tuberculosis can be prevented by appropriate nutrition, vitamin D levels, which when you think about most large swaths of the world still have nutrient deficiencies, and so these are basic things that should be basic for people everywhere in the world, but in today's high tech world, we're still lacking the most foundational health tools.
I tell you, man, we're still lacking it. So finally, let's talk about your book. What is the title of your book and how can your book help people improve their health and life?
The title of the book is Incurable: From Hopeless Diagnosis to Defying All Odds. And the basic gist, I walked through my daughter's story. We talked about it a little bit early on. I walk about a lot of other patients' stories, people that were written off by our healthcare system. It can't be helped. It's all in your head. Hopeless diagnosis. And give examples about how just applying the basic interventions can radically change their health trajectory. And the point of the book is this: if this little girl, you know, born after having a stroke, drug exposed the entire pregnancy, born blind, if she can beat every odd, you can too. So the purpose of the book is hope and to get people engaged in their own health. Because unfortunately, the system says there's no hope, sorry, da da da. And people sometimes just need to know there are other options out there. And again, if this little girl can do it, you can do it too. And that's the main message I have for people is that it's possible. You need to have faith, you need to believe, and then need the right tools, right? Education, like you said before. And that's what I try to provide for people in my website, my blogs, my podcast, all the book, all these things is to give people the tools, regardless of where they're at in the world. They can literally apply these principles to help
And
with their health.
that's so thoughtful of you. And thank you so very much for writing that wonderful book. And I'll take that as a final thought. When folks tend to listen to others' testimony, it could ignite a possibility within them. I got that. So finally, my man, for folks who would like to reach out to you, learn more about the wonderful stuff you're doing, or make a purchase of your wonderful book, or even ask you questions, how can that be possible?
Yeah, I have two major hubs. One is just a Aaron Hartman MD website, which is my name, AARON Hartman, HARTMAN MD.com. And the book is uncurablebook.com. That takes you to the book. And then if you want to learn about me, that'll take you to the podcasts and my resume and a book reading list, and all the resources come from that site, including if you want to see me or reach out to me, that's all through the Aaron Hartman MD website.
Beautiful. So that's going to be the end of the show, my man. Thank you for coming in. Wow. Thank you for opening our eyes to this beautiful stuff. It means a whole lot, man. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing, let me come on your show and share with your community.